Have you ever felt like God was calling you to something and your first reaction was, are you talking to me? You got the wrong person. Let's look at an example that is very encouraging to many of us, but especially those who undermine their capabilities. When we meet Gideon in Judges, starting on chapter 6, we see that Israel is living in fear. The Midianites have been oppressing them for years. And why? Because Israel has bowed down to other gods. And this is evil in the eyes of the Lord. Every time the Israelite planted crops, the enemy comes and destroys them. And so the people of God hid in caves. What about Gideon? He was threshing wheat inside a wine press. But do you know that that's not where you thresh the wheat? Normally, you do that outside in the open where the wind can carry the chaff away. But Gideon was hiding in fear. And in that moment, the angel of the Lord, and probably I should do a separate episode on who is the angel of the Lord, a Christophany. The angel of the Lord appears and says something that is astonishing. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Think about that. Gideon is hiding and God calls him mighty warrior? Are you kidding? Why? Well, because God does not only see what you are, He sees what you will become when He is with you. Gideon immediately pushes back. He says, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh. I am the least in my family. Basically, in other words, he's saying, you got the wrong guy. I am the least of the least. And maybe you have said the same thing. I'm not qualified. I'm not strong enough. I'm not the leader type. I cannot do this. But God's answer to Gideon is very simple. I will be with you. And notice something that is, I think, very important here. God does not argue with Gideon about his weakness. He doesn't say, no, Gideon, you're actually very talented. Instead, God shifts the focus completely. The issue is not Gideon's ability. The issue is God's presence. Even after that, even after the angel nukes the sacrifice, Gideon still struggles with doubt. And honestly, this is comforting to us because it shows something about how God works with people. Gideon asked for a sign, then another sign, and then the opposite sign. I think you might remember the story, the story about the fleece. First, Gideon says, well, let the fleece be wet and the ground be dry around it. And God does it. But then Gideon still struggles, so he comes back and asks the Lord, well, let the fleece be dry this time and the ground wet around it. And God does it again. But what is remarkable is not Gideon's hesitation, though it shows how dense he is with his doubt. What is remarkable is God's patience. God doesn't discard Gideon because of his fear. He walks him forward step by step. So Gideon finally gets to work and he gathers this army of 32,000 warriors to fight the Midianites. And that sounds impressive until you learn that the enemy's army is about 125,000. So the odds are terrible. We're talking 4-1. But then God says something shocking. You have too many men. Too many? Are you kidding me? God begins reducing the army. First, anyone who is afraid, go home. And 22,000 leave. So now Gideon has 10,000. Still too many. And God says, narrow it down. Finally, Gideon is left with 300 men. That means that the Israelites basically had to kill 450 enemies each. That's a suicide mission. And why would God do that? Well, God explains it clearly. Israel might boast against me, saying, my own strength has saved me. In other words, God removed every possible reason for human pride. So that when victory comes, everyone knows exactly where it came from. And with only 300 men, Gideon surrounds the Midianite camp at night. And then they blow the trumpets, they break the jars, they shout, they create chaos. And that chaos spreads through the enemy camp. So the Midianites wake up, they begin fighting with each other. Some are fleeing, some are dead, and Israel wins. So the man who was hiding in a wine press became the leader who delivers Israel. And here's the truth that we should not miss. God calls you what you are not yet, because He already sees what you will become with Him. Gideon was not a mighty warrior when God called him. He actually was afraid. He was doubtful. He needed reassurance. But God saw beyond Gideon's present condition. And God God patiently shaped him into the man he had already called him to be. So the application, well, maybe today you feel like Gideon. You feel afraid, you feel inadequate, overlooked, or unqualified. Oh, I cannot do this. And when you sense God calling you, your reaction is, are you talking to me? You got the wrong guy. No, the story of Gideon reminds us that God does not choose people because they are the best. He chooses what is weak in the world to shame the strong. We see that in 1 Corinthians 1:27. And remember this, God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Gideon began hiding in a wine press, but he finished as a leader who delivered Israel. Not because Gideon was strong, but because God had already decided who Gideon would become. And the same God who called Gideon may already be calling you something that you have yet to become. So, what is your answer? Love you guys and gals, and Lord willing, I catch you next week. Ciao.